This
knows,
conference will now be recorded.
as everyone knows, this is Lonnie. As everyone knows, I think we're going to lose a couple of people in an hour. So we're sort of trying to get the the critical information out first. Is everybody okay with the reorganizing the agenda lineup?
Yes.
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 Okay.
Great.
So should I call the meeting to order right now? Are we ready?
Perfect.
Okay. Calling the meeting to order. Public comments. Any public comments? So actually the first item is the consent agenda item, the minutes, and the minutes from our last meeting. And also we want to talk about financing programs recommendations. We go there now?
Yeah, so on the consent agenda, before we go through the meeting minute approval, let me just give a quick update because we included some meeting materials for the board there. So we included our quarterly progress to targets. So through Q3 of our fiscal year, we were doing great up through Q3. Now there's a lot of uncertainty with regards to COVID-19. So we were actually ahead of target in terms of the number of projects. We were at 80% of our goal in terms of the level of investment. We were right at the goal at 75%. And then in terms of the installed capacity, we were at 80%. So we were looking good coming into or through Q3. Now we've got some uncertainty with COVID-19. So we'll see how it goes. And we're going to talk about it today. A large part of our meeting today is going to be the team expressing what they're seeing within the respective segments of the market. We also did see a discrepancy in some of our data after we sent out the memo. So we're going to send out a revised red line memo. We overstated some of the Smarty loan projects by 46 projects in the investment number by $765,000. So we've been, you may know, we've been transitioning the data platform that we were using before to a national platform that Inclusive Prosperity Capital has been developing with Michigan. So we had a few little hiccups there. I'm gonna mute caller 10. I just muted caller 10. So we've got to update our kind of coding of the systems so that will sync better, but it's just a small kink. So we're going to send out a revised memo in terms of Q3 progress to targets. And then on communications, we included in the packet essentially what we've been doing in terms of the communications that are coming from me to our stakeholders. So we've been focusing around 3 key messages. One is on the public health crisis, which is that we are guided by the governor. So all the executive orders, 30 plus executive orders now, that is guiding our message to our various stakeholders. Shelter in place, social distancing, unit essential business, all those sorts of things we are communicating through the guidance of the governor. Secondly is the economic assistance. So we've been providing our contractors and customers with information on state and federal assistance. So we've been coordinating really closely with DECD, the governor's office, the utilities on, for example, the CARES Act webinars that we were running. We coordinated with the Department of Banking, with a few of our Smarty loan lenders to make sure that they know the PPP is available to them and the like. So economic assistance has been our second. And then third is we want to prepare for the future. So I think our focus is trying to ensure a V-shaped economic recovery once the public health crisis subsides. So we now have a survey in the field that we're going to share some preliminary results with you over the course of the morning in terms of what contractors are feeling in the field. And our purpose of that survey is to really increase our understanding of how the recovery revitalization and stabilization of the industry can be expedited once the COVID-19 crisis subsides. So again, it's all about the V-shaped recovery. So those are the three things our communications have been focusing on, from me to the market. And then our various program directors are doing a great job diligently communicating through their channels on specific details. And they'll talk about some of that as we go through the programs this morning. So that's just a quick update, but if we want to go back, Lonnie, to the approval of the meeting minutes on resolution 1, that would be great.
Good. Do I hear a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
This is Sabina, so
moved.
moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. Okay,
Perfect.
so then moving on to
Perfect. So we're going to move to
the financing.
the financing programs here, and we're going to
Okay.
turn this over to Mackie.
Great, thanks, Brian. This is Mackie Dykes with Green Bank. Next slide, please. So we'll start with the update on COVID-19 impact on financing programs. We'll start with CPACE. From a sort of market perspective, on the lending front, as you can imagine, we have seen a slowdown. We did actually close a project earlier this week. We had a third-party lender who closed the second largest CPACE project in Connecticut earlier this week. But both those projects have been in the pipeline for some time. We do see projects that, the CPACE development timeline is fairly long, months to sometimes a year or more. So the projects that we're closing now have predate COVID by a good bit of time. So we do have some that we expect to close in the coming weeks, but generally the pipeline, we've seen a lot of projects just stall due to uncertainty, and then top of the funnel, their new leads has, for the most part, dried up. On the third-party capital provider side, we've heard of one of the major players going through major downsizing, reducing staff. But on the flip side, we've heard of others that have so far avoided layoffs and at this point don't see the need to. So it's really impacting lenders in different ways in terms of their response, but in terms of demand, seems to be pretty uniform impact on slowing it down. From our lending standpoint, we are making payment deferrals available at customer request. We've got currently 7 requests in, so we're working through the restructuring options to move that July payment and give them different options for how it's treated. There's also a recent executive order 7S, which created relief options for property taxes and tax assessments, which include CPACE. So there's different options that towns have to opt into. They have to choose at least one. One option involves deferral of 90 days, and another involves lower interest penalties. So we're working with our capital providers and all the towns to, once we know what option towns have chosen, to make sure that CPACE assessments are treated appropriately. On the SBEA, the Small Business Energy Advantage front, that program was shut down pretty early in the pandemic. Eversource in March just closed that down. So as you can imagine, that's pretty much led to a halt in activity. From the lending standpoint, we are offering 90-day payment deferrals available at customer request through Eversource. The uptake so far has been on that deferral has been pretty slow, but I think that's a factor of a lot of people because there's a sort of moratorium on shutoff and penalties for not paying your electric bill. I think people are just assuming they don't have to pay the on-bill financing as well. So I think we're going to see a lot more non-payments. And then on the PPA front, the same, we have payment deferrals available at customer request, and we see a similar slowdown here in terms of new activity. Carrie O'Neill, are you on? Can I turn it over to you to talk through the remaining bullets
Sure
here?
thing, Mackie. I'm on. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Carrie O'Neill from Inclusive Prosperity Capital, where we support Connecticut Green Bank on a number of these programs. So for our residential solar lease programs and CT solar loan, these are closed programs where we're working through a portfolio of leases and loans. For SL1 and SL2, as we colloquially refer to the lease programs, they're serviced by Renew Financial. And we've been in communication with Renew about offering upon request a 90-day payment deferral. We've worked with them on scripting and the forms that would need to be used if customers do request them. We haven't seen anything officially yet, but there are 3 or 4 that we'll probably see in the next week or so. We have weekly check-ins with Renew because this is a large number of leases. For CT Solar Loan, this is a very small portfolio, about 280 loans. So similarly communicating with the servicing partner there and the origination partner there, offering up payment deferrals upon request. And we've not seen any requests, or they've not received any interest yet from that. Early days, but we've got a good plan in place there. On multifamily, where by and large most of the activity is out with our CDFI partners, Capital for Change and Housing Development Fund. We've talked to both of those partners, offering a 90-day payment deferral upon request. We know Capital for Change has been contacted by at least one borrower who has 2 loans. We do expect something there. I think generally, the multifamily sector is being, especially the affordable multifamily sector, is being hit extraordinarily hard. These are properties that have difficulty cash flowing the best of times. So with rents potentially falling significantly, this is definitely an area that we're watching closely with our partners. And in terms of the pipeline, it's at a standstill. Most property owners and housing authorities are, really in crisis mode, especially with their residents who are dealing with job losses and what have you. So we should expect that the pipeline will be at a standstill for quite some time. Next slide. I think it's back to Mackie.
Great, Mackie, you there? You might be on mute.
Thank you, Brian. Was. This is some preliminary results from a survey that the Green Bank did of the clean energy industry broadly. I pulled out some of the responses from a couple contractor subsets just to try to get a preliminary sense for sort of what we were seeing out there. On the SBA front, as I mentioned, this program was shut down. So as you can imagine, the impact has been severe. They just really can't create new business. They can't go on site. People are trying to do what they can, mailings, calls, but they're just not working for the most part in terms of generating up new business. As you can see, the sort of average response on how new business is down to 72%. And then in terms of existing projects, the utilities did allow contractors to finish projects that were already approved and in the queue, but they've still seen a halt there just because customers don't want to move forward at this time. So 73% of existing projects have been affected. And I think most glaring here is almost 100% of the respondents have had some, or said they had some impact on their staff, either laid off, furloughed, or reduced hours for employees. On the commercial solar side, more broadly, the same thing we're seeing on the CPACE solar financing side. Projects are just stalled because customers aren't ready to make the sort of large decision, the large investment right at this period in time. New business is down 61%, and 3/4 of solar contractors say it'll take at least 6 months. Several said at least a year for once we do reopen for their businesses to recover. We've been doing what we can to help with some relief. very early on when the shutdown happened, the Green Bank filed with PURA to extend the ZREC window for the upcoming auction, just to give the industry more time to close deals and submit bids, assuming that it'd take longer to get that done, given the social distancing and the fact that everything's virtual. We also requested some relief on project and service dates. You start to lose revenue if you don't meet certain contractual deadlines. So assuming that construction and development will be delayed, we requested some relief there. Our auction request was granted. The ZREC auction has been extended a month with possible more extensions depending on what happens. On the deadline, PURA kind of went halfway and granted some relief on termination dates, but not the full step we asked, which would provide revenue relief on the ZREC contracts, but they're still looking into that. So the industry was very supportive of what we did. I got several comments about how helpful it would be, and we also saw filings with PURA supporting it across the board. So we're hopeful that they'll take the second action as well.
Mackie, this is Bettina. Can I ask a question?
Of course.
On the ZREC relief, does that affect any of the cash flows on any that support any outstanding bonds?
No, it would not. It would affect our state projects that which we'll actually talk about in a little bit. Could help with recovering some anticipated lost ZREC revenue, but there's no bonds on that. So no effect on that.
Great, thank you.
Great. Any other questions, comments for Mackie and Carrie? Thank you for that overview.
This is John. I had a question about PURA. Does them hearing from other people or public comment or hearing from the contractors or any of that, does that have an impact on their decision making?
Yes, absolutely. And when we filed this request with PURA, we sent out several communications to contractors, and we're calling them as well, encouraging them to make their voice heard at PURA on it. But
is there any way to expand that? I mean, do we want to reach out like to the environmental community or anything like that?
That's a great idea. It's a little opaque right now.
Yeah,
PURA. Well, yeah, more opaque than normal, I guess. They ruled and sort of closed out the process on what we asked for, and like I said, didn't give on the second request. But they did indicate, they said, we'll look into this, and requested some data, but it's unclear, what that looks like. So maybe that's a good idea. We should.
I mean, if it's possible, just to put out like a one sheet that sums up the issue and how to get in touch. If that could be disseminated around.
It's a great idea. Yeah, I'll speak with Matt Masunas on that.
Alrighty. Thanks.
Hey, Mackie, I had two sort of observations or maybe questions. One is on the first part of your presentation with the like the CPACE and other programs where we are working with our constituents to defer payments. I just wonder in some of the things we've seen here with my office, we've always had to be careful to look at our financing partners to make sure that if we're making deferments beyond what the executive orders call for, that in some instances we have to notify or get consent of our other financial partners. So I don't know if that's something you guys are on the lookout for with our various agreements with our financing partners.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, sorry, go on.
And then two, on the PURA, I've seen all the filings, and I would just say that one of the things that, or maybe not all of them, some of them, but one of the things I'm hearing is these delivery term start date issue is a big issue because of the uncertainty that you alluded to. And it's not really about people wanting to walk away from projects. It's just about keeping investors involved as those delivery term start dates get closer. Because if you don't extend those, but you extend the termination date, it doesn't really help because it destroys the financing. So I would just say, in terms of your survey, that's something I'm hearing out there.
Yeah, absolutely. The without diving too much into the details and all the acronyms, you're right. I mean, without the DTSD, missing that is lost money. You have less time on your ZREC contract. Your revenue is unambiguously decreased. What they did does not, even though the utilities said in their filings that it provides the same relief, it also unambiguously does not. So yeah, we're hoping that Pure will recognize that there's we're in the middle of it, and they alluded to this. They said, they've had this request before, but it's a big precedent setting step to take. So they didn't do it here, but they recognize the extraordinary circumstances, and they're looking into it because, yeah, I mean, at some point projects fall apart because you're losing too much revenue and the investors can't stay in. On your first question, yes, we're on SBEA. Amalgamated Bank is our partner there. They're at the table, and on all our discussions about how to handle deferrals, they've been fantastic in working with us on that. On CPACE, yeah, we have some of these deals are bonded with Clean Fund, so we're starting to bridge that now, how to deal with that. But a lot of these are on our balance sheet, so we have full flexibility to deal with that. And then the third parties, the executive order was clear that it applies to them. There was additional guidance that was called out CPACE. It applies, so third parties are adjusting appropriately.
Mackie, this is Eric, and I apologize. I had to join a little late, but I heard the part about the downtrend in business fairly significantly for solar and others. Is that your sense? Is that purely based on economic pressure and people being very cautious right now, or are there any of the work restrictions? I don't know if those contractors are considered essential businesses, or are there things other than just sort of the economic cautiousness out there that is impacting that?
So solar was designated construction job, so it is essential business. So they are able to work. Some of the discussions I've had is that the construction side of the industry is sort of full speed ahead. You got empty schools, some empty buildings, so they're taking advantage of that. But it hasn't been across the board. Some where there is. I guess I can't speak to the residential side too much, but customers have or for projects not as far along where they can be in construction, permitting, things like that. The municipalities are stretched now. Permitting's tougher, so that's led to delays in terms of getting to the point of being ready to construct. And then even earlier in the sort of the process, what you outlined is definitely having an impact where the customer's still deciding whether to move forward, sign contracts, and get everything going. Definitely the uncertainty about such a major investment in this time has had an impact. I mean, we saw a $2 million plus solar deal get delayed until at least the summer for that very reason. They're just it's a big investment and there's too much uncertainty. So yeah, it's more that top to middle of the development channel, not as much of an impact on the construction side because it's an essential business.
Great, thank you.
Mackie, it's Lonnie. I'm hearing a lot from our municipal teams about concerns about all kinds of property tax vulnerabilities. And I'm just wondering if there's reassuring them about CPACE, because I'm hearing from some of our Board of Finance people as well.
I'd be interested in hearing what that, learning more about that. We haven't heard much sort of CPACE related problems from municipalities. I think they've had, they got bigger problems.
Yeah.
So they're not reaching out to us. But if you're hearing things, that would be great to get that feedback so we can be, we're trying to be as accommodating and, and do as much of the work as we can to help with the, dealing with CPACE. Because you're right, they're facing a lot with these property tax deferrals. I mean, that's going to, defer their income. So they've got to understand the executive order, and then they have to, each one has to vote to decide what their relief option is going to be. So they've got yet another thing on their plate. So yeah, it'd be great to get some.
Yeah, no, I think
info on that.
They've been asking me about full faith and credit stuff. How
no,
how
they have no
backed up are these obligations?
From the municipal standpoint, they don't have any. They're not on the hook for backing them at all.
Okay, I've been saying that, but I just want to make sure and not.
That's correct. They are assigned the ownership and rights and responsibilities are assigned to the lender. So all the rights that come with the senior tax assessment, as well as all the responsibilities that come with it, are out of the hands of the town and with the owners of the CPACE assessment.
Good. Thank you.
All right.
Great. So we'll now move to a recommendation around our state solar portfolio, the Green Bank Solar PPA Lead by Example. Just to refresh everyone's memory, this is our pilot project to deploy solar at state facilities. We've got 11 projects totaling 11 megawatts, primarily at Department of Correction, also one project at DAS, the state office building, I think Bettina's new home, and a deep fish hatchery. Sorry, I had a 3-year-old bust in the room. So far we've sort of done the feasibility analysis on the site, we've scoped out the projects. We applied for interconnection, where we had some concerns about grid impact and additional costs there. We did get some good news back recently on that. We had been forecasting about $500,000 in upgrade costs. It's actually going to be about $39,000. So that'll be a nice reduction in how bad we thought it would be. We secured the ZRECs, and then we went out a few months ago to secure an EPC contractor for the projects. We selected one winner for the whole portfolio, and then we jumped into negotiating a contract with them. Next slide. And I think, as the board will recall, our plan had been to back at the end of the year and in January finish up that work with the EPC contractor and get a financing RFP out. We still haven't done that. The contract talks went much longer than expected. We kept finding more and more agreements that we had to work through. First it was the EPC, then it was the production guarantee, then it was the O&M agreement. There's just one after the other. It took much longer than expected. We are close to finishing that up, but at this point, due to timing considerations around primarily the ITC, as well as the ZRECs, we would like to bring a recommendation to the board for the Green Bank to continue the development role we have been playing. Instead of running the financing RFP now, which from a timing standpoint, we think would mean, you put it out, got to leave it open for 3 to 4 weeks, get responses, evaluate them. You're looking at least a month and a half there. Then, we saw what the contract negotiation looked like with us. Now a new party is starting that. So, that's going to add months to the timeline. So we want to get these things under construction. So what we'd like to do is go ahead and get PPAs with not to exceed prices based on our modeling in front of the state, get those signed, and then Green Bank can execute the EPCs, and we could start funding the construction. In parallel, we would start to look at potential new ownership structures that might be opening up. Our plan had always been, as I mentioned, to issue that RFP and sell these projects to owners. We've got a pre-qualified list. We'll just delay that a little bit, sort of worst case scenario. The other option perhaps could be clean renewable energy bonds. There's already been several stimulus packages. There's more in the works. Potentially, Krebs could be a part of that, and that could be a new option. So this allows us to get the project started while we sort of sit back and make sure or look for the best ownership structures for these deals. Next slide.
Kevin, did you have
a question?
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't sure if I do have a question. I think folks know that development is the riskiest part of the capital structure when you think about any type of project, putting a project together, and you just alluded to the complexities of putting it together, and things can go wrong in development that can halt a project in its tracks. So if you could talk about how you're managing risks here, and also you mentioned exiting these projects at some point. What kind of returns are you seeing that would suggest that there will be a good exit for us from these?
Mm-hmm. On the exit side, through the plan had been through our RFP to secure ownership. We have a development fee for the Green Bank for the work we've done baked into that. So that would, we're not trying to make money off the state here. So we were just looking to recoup our cost. We also had an option for those owners to take Green Bank debt for the projects if they'd like. But it was not required. So that would, the fee would get us our costs back, and then there was potential revenue on the debt side. But we're kind of playing more of a facilitation role in our quasi-state role here to break down these sort of long-term barriers the state has had to deploying solar. So we're in a unique position due to our solar experience, as well as our sort of being a quasi-public, what that allows us from a procurement and contractual standpoint. So, yeah, that, hopefully we could realize some revenue through the debt side. While also, we were offering slightly discounted debt to know what we typically do. So also hoping that we could, help with the state PPA price.
Yeah, but I mean, I understand the objective here to prime the pump, and I think that's admirable. 19 or $20 million of development risk, if I understand the slide correctly, is not insignificant. So, nope. The other comment I guess I would make is typically when companies take on development risk, they look to diversify that risk across a number of projects, and they also look. Early stage development is riskier than late stage development, right? So it sounds like we're coming in early. We're taking all the development risk, and we've got. Was it fair to say we've got the offtake party is a state entity, and they're not going away, right? They're going to be there. We're going to negotiate a rate, or there's understood what the rate is for that PPA, and that's oftentimes that's the linchpin on development is securing a PPA that makes the economics work. Is it fair to say we've got a captive customer in that regard?
That's correct. And for years there's been sort of no pathway to getting this done. I think the state views us as right now the path for doing this. The groups put together around the executive order 1 to promote clean energy, and the executive branch has designated sort of the Green Bank, and this process is the path to go solar. So from that standpoint, sort of the off-taker identification and locking them down. The risk there is, it's fairly low. I mean, there is, I think, more it's contractual risk with the Attorney General that we can't get there. If we can't get a form that's acceptable to them. But since we have done that through through the state colleges and university system, we've gotten them comfortable with a form of PPA. We think that's fairly low. But going in, we'd always known, I think from the PPA and state standpoint, that had been identified as our biggest risk, that and figuring out the procurement path. So we spent 2 years on that before we started deploying dollars into developing the projects themselves. I'd say the procurement one is, I think pretty much never 100% solved, but to assign, but pretty sure we've mitigated that risk. PPA one, we continue to work on with the state, but I think we're right now the only option. So there's a lot of pressure for them to get comfortable with some form of the PPA.
Well, and Mackie, it's Bert here. If I can just interject, there's no expectation that we're going to put out any meaningful dollars beyond what we've put to hold on to the ZRECs. Maybe some immaterial amounts of money, but until we've got some kind of assurance from the state that they're going to enter into these PPAs, my understanding was it's not expected that we're going to enter into anything that's going to commit us to build projects when we don't have a customer on the other side, right?
Oh yeah, that's where I was headed. Taking this step and giving us the authority to do this will allow us to do is get final PPAs in front of them. Before, we needed to go through the RFP process so we could get some pricing in place. Now what we'll do is sort of plan to use our pricing as a not to exceed. We can get the contracts in front of the state ready for signature so we can ink those, then sign the EPCs. So that's correct. We're not going to start building these things or expending these requested dollars under the EPC until we have that PPA signed.
Okay, that's very helpful, because that's a good risk mitigation approach that I was kind of driving at. So that's helpful to know, and I think it'll be helpful to get. To get regular updates at the board about how well you're doing exiting these transactions as they get finished, because I think that's also important here, that we're not. I mean, if we decide to hold them, it's because they're good investments and we want to hold them. But ultimately, they should be something that we can sell if we want to as well.
Exactly, Kevin. And there are 12 separate projects. The smallest one has a project cost of about $200,000. The largest one, $3.9 million. So there's quite a dispersion of project risk around all these transactions.
Hey, Bert and Mackie, it's Matt. Could I ask a question? So I'm a little confused from that conversation. When would we then be going out for an RFP for financing? Because it sounded like we were going to do it early, and then Mackie, from your description, it sounded like if we didn't do it then, we would do it once these were built. But did I hear you wrong, or are we going to look after we get the PPAs signed? Would we look then? It just seems like these are attractive projects, and I've heard from folks, who have money to spend, they have investments, and candidly, a signed PPA with the state entity is probably as good as it gets in this climate. So, I wouldn't want to miss an opportunity to bring in private money here for a lot of reasons. So when do you envision we would, delay that stage to?
So, yes, I guess a couple points there. Exactly when, can't really say yet, because we want to evaluate and keep our eye on the Krebs opportunity. At minimum, we just want to get the PPA signed with the state and get the EPCs signed so that development work can start. Permit. Some of these have to go to siting council. There's state SEPA process we're going to have to run through. We just want to get that work started so we don't lose any more time. Then we can start to look. I mean, I don't know. We don't really want to take these all the way to the construction completion and then sell them. Because we want to get out as early as possible. And based on the response we got from the pre-qualification process, there's a lot of interest, as you alluded to. So we'd like to get out as early as possible. We want to get them started, and then sort of evaluate where the market is in terms of whether the Krebs or something like that opportunity would be there. I guess if there's no if really it's clear that's not going to happen, then we can proceed right to unloading them and having someone else step in. But if there is some potential to get a better deal through the state through one of those new ownership opportunities that might open up, then I think we'd look at delaying it to see whether that could happen.
And this is Bettina. I just need to make the comment, wearing my state of Connecticut hat, that the state is looking for the best possible pricing. This is not going to be just because the state is the beneficiary on this doesn't mean that we can pile on all kinds of fees and profit margins on this. The state is looking for best execution and best pricing.
This is Bert here. That's always been the objective here. We've approached this from being competitive on the EPC side, the build side. We managed to get a really good build price for the state, through that process. And the whole objective on the financing side was to replicate that competition on the financing side. So that the end goal is to make sure that the state gets the best financing arrangement, be that through the regular competitive PPA route using sourced tax equity funds, solar funds with tax equity, that come in, whether that's Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan or whatever, whoever is coming in, or through a tax credit subsidy bond that might come back to life. Everything's going to be priced out to make sure that we get the price down as low as possible for the state. That's always been the objective.
Right, because the headline risk would not be good. I know you guys all know that. I just needed to say it. So okay, thanks.
Sure. We say it every meeting. Yeah, that every decision we evaluate first through that prism. What's the best deal for the state? Which is why we're, as I mentioned earlier, the fee we're putting on this is just to recoup our cost, and frankly, it'll be close on that. So we're not looking to profit. We're overall the Green Bank wants to get sustainability, but that's not the first objective with this effort. The primary one is what you alluded to. We got to get the best deal for the state.
Right, and as you mentioned earlier, I mean, these are projects that have kind of stymied the state. Like how can we get these things done? Yeah. And for the Green Bank to finally thread the needle and get it done will be a really huge accomplishment for these projects. and getting the first one done. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. And this request, to put more money out is not, and use more Green Bank money than previously we requested, is not because we want to get more money in so we earn more return. It's again, what's the best deal for the state? We want to. This is us, as Kevin was alluding to, potentially taking on, I think we slightly more risk because we want to get these things moving because ITC and ZREC deadlines are looming, and that's going to have an effect on the price to the state. So that's why we're recommending this approach.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Lonnie. I just want to say, building on what Bettina was saying, and going forward with this process, you're still interacting with these key agencies, including the Treasurer's Office, right? So it's not like we're giving you a carte blanche. I mean, you're going to be interacting, and there's going to be a level of oversight going forward.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
I guess this is I guess I'm just looking at the resolution though. It seems to, I mean, it's asking for 19 million five, and it includes construction money. So I guess I would just, I guess my wish is, having done some lead by example and one with the state, the problem always I think has been the contracting and getting through DAS and and the Attorney General, not the finance part of it. And so I would just, if we're going to approve that resolution, Mackie, I would just hope that we also authorize you to revisit the timing of when to do the financing RFP, because I think for optics, it would be important to get private money in, because again, part of this success here is opening the door on all these lead by example to state agency, which have been blocked previously. But if it's opened completely with sort of green bank money, green bank effort, I think that makes it less of an open door. People are wondering, yeah, well, can a private, project with private money do the same thing? So I would just say if we're going to adopt that resolution, that the intent be that you guys keep an eye on when the opportunity is to put out that financing RFP, as opposed to going through and using this as construction financing.
Yep, point taken, and we can provide regular. I think, as Kevin alluded to earlier, every board meeting we can provide just a quick update on where we are. Again, that number represents taking them through completely through construction. We don't want to do that. The only reason we would do that is because there's some better financing opportunity through Krebs or something like that that's potentially out there. Otherwise, yeah, we would get these sold off and take out our whatever money we put into them. We want to get that taken out as soon as possible. But whatever,
as you said earlier, it's Kevin again. So I think the key is not committing to build until you have a PPA, right? That's
right.
That's
and our
what we talked
standard
about.
practice, we don't sign EPCs until a PPA is signed. That's our standard practice on even 50 kilowatt projects.
There's absolutely no upside for the green bank in doing that.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. And then of course if
I can put it bluntly.
Right. No, that's very helpful, very clear. And ultimately you'll need to have third-party capital to come in to monetize tax credits, right?
Right.
We as the green bank and the state can't use federal tax credits, right? So
yes, the only Kevin, the only possible evolution in what could happen here could be one of two things. One could be whether a 1603 monetization of the tax credit comes back. The 1603 program was when the Treasury was allowed to pay the equivalent of the investment tax credit. At the same time, that doesn't monetize depreciation. So you've got that aspect to deal with. But so there's some complexities here. But there could be a tax credit subsidy bond, which Mackie was talking about. Krebs, clean renewable energy bonds. So those could come back to life as a result of COVID legislation. ACOR, which you're very much involved in, is trying to bring some of these, not all of these, but some of these things. And there are a number of lobbying groups that are trying to bring a number of these initiatives forward. Whether they'll be successful or not, or who knows. So we're just trying to build in some optionality here. So with the end goal of getting, as Bettina mentioned, the best value for the state.
Right.
And Mackie, Lonnie, again, just quickly, in the survey you're doing, I mean, are you diving deep and sort of getting a sense, taking the temperature of the private investment community and what looks attractive to them?
The survey, it's primarily more contractor. Brian, I think you're closer to who it went out to. I saw it was primarily sort of contractor and Connecticut focused.
Yeah, it's mainly, Lonnie, it's mainly focused on all the contractors that we work through who are doing the actual construction work, as opposed to the financing community. I can get a breakdown of all the stakeholders we sent to. It's like 1,700 different groups, but I suspect that 95% of them are contractors. But I'll take a look.
Okay,
we can really slice and dice data too if we have it.
Yep. Hey Brian, this is Kevin again. I'm one of the guys that has to jump at 10, so we want to not the rest of the discussion, but move this to a vote.
Great.
Yeah, we ready to vote on resolution 2? Do I hear a motion?
This is Kevin. I'll make a motion to approve.
Second?
Second, John Harity.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. It passes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And again, this is Kevin signing off. Thank you for great discussion and look forward to talking to you all soon.
Thanks, Kevin. Your input is so helpful. Thank you.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, so
we still have a quorum, right?
We do. We've got Mike and Eric still on. Yep.
Hey, Brian, this is Mike. I got to roll in about 10 minutes, though.
Okay. Let's see how quickly.
So we're coming up to investment recommendations. It's our next item.
That's right. Number 6. Great. So let me just provide a high-level overview on our loan loss decision framework. You might all recall back in, or many of you, not all of you, back in June of 2018 when we passed our loan loss decision framework.
Actually, Brian, could I ask maybe that we flip these around to do the Louise's transaction first?
All right. All right. We may not,
because I think that'll be much quicker, and then we'll get to the other one. Okay.
So if the board's okay, we'll move to the second agenda item 6 on Skyview Ventures.
Yeah, just a note, Brian, I'm going to recuse myself on this one because some of those projects are projects I was involved with.
Okay. Thank you, Matt.
So Louise, if you could move quickly through that, because we do need to get back to the loan loss decision framework. We'll make sure the transaction gets approved.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Bert. Okay, just a quick refresh for the board here. You might recognize this transaction because you actually approved resolutions regarding it at the last board meeting in March. The update is that since that point, Skyview, the counterparty, has presented additional opportunities for us to deploy debt into the same structure and on the same basis in terms of interest rate and DSCR and advance rate, etc. But it's an opportunity to increase the facility size and it will be secured, obviously, as a result, will be secured by additional projects that Skyview has presented to us. So the update here is that the previously approved 2.3 million, asking for a restated approval to 3.5 million. And that's because the number of projects that would secure the debt has increased from 20 up to 26. The collateral snapshot has of course changed accordingly with the new projects. It's actually all favorable. We now have a longer weighted remaining PPA term, which means we would be lending 15-year debt against projects that have almost 19 years of contracted cash flows. So that's better position to be in as lender. Next slide, please. And also some positives that have changed with the update is a greater cushion in terms of stress testing the cash flows, so that if production on the projects that are securing this debt was to drop by 10% against expectation, the DSCR would still be 1.18, which is comfortable. That's a better number than it was prior when we presented to you. And the break-even DSCR would mean production dropping by 22% versus expectation. When I previously presented it to you, it was 20%. So it's an overall improvement to the collateral pool and associated increase to the requested loan facility that I'm coming to you for approval for today. Next slide. These slides are exactly the same. So same DSCR, same advance rate, same economic terms. And yeah, if we could move on to the next slide. You just see in red there that it's an updated facility size, 3.5 million. And on the next slide, in the resolution, it's to amend and restate the previous approval by the board.
Perfect. Thank you, Louise. Madam Chair?
Do I hear a motion to approve Resolution 5?
Bettina, so moved.
Or second, John
Second.
Harry.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Resolution 5 passes. So now we're going to back to the investment recommendations
Perfect.
and loan loss decision framework. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Is it just me, or but the slides that's on the screen is I still have lead by example solar pilot requested slide up.
Oh,
I think it's just you.
Is it just
It's
me?
moving.
Oh.
It's moving for me.
It's moving for me as well.
Okay. Maybe I should just refresh. We'll probably. Okay, thanks.
Hit that little COVID button.
That's right. Oh gosh.
Okay, so so back to our loan loss framework. So back in June of 2018, you might recall we put forth and approved of a framework that would enable us to restructure and write off various transactions. So the deployment committee, the audit compliance and governance committee played a role in recommending those decisions and in some cases approving them. And then if certain transactions were higher than $1 million, they would all be brought forward to the board. So that was a fundamental part of our evolution and maturation as an organization, as our asset base built. But it was also a key part of our sustainability objectives after the sweep. So we want to ensure that we're building a asset base delivering interest income to support the organization. What we've got here, you also might recall back in late 2018 when we restructured a Brookfield YMCA transaction. This was actually the first application of our loan loss decision framework where they had a combined heat and power unit that wasn't being properly maintained or utilized and resulted in less energy savings than they had anticipated. So we worked with the YMCA to essentially restructure the transaction using this framework and running that through the deployment committee. So that was an example. But with COVID-19, what we're trying to do here is to be ready for the impact on our various borrowers. Bert's going to run through some transactions here, and Bert, I'll turn this over to you in a second. And as well as managing the risk of our organization by expanding our provision for loan losses. Bert, why don't I turn this to you? And there are certain bullet points on this slide that if you want to pick me up here on probably the near-term cash impacts and work from there.
Sure, yes, because the, can you hear me okay?
Perfect, Bert, yep.
Okay, Yeah, because the first bullet's talking about the recognizing that we need to forbear, possibly forbear as customers come in and seek accommodation. That's pretty much been covered by Carrie and Mackie earlier in the conversation here. So we set about in finance with the accounting team to look at our near-term maximum cash impact for the April to July period, using very severe assumptions, meaning that the entire portfolio was affected, meaning people failed to pay. And we looked at that, including a 6-month hit to our CPACE transactions, meaning that all of the July transactions that typically yield cash for us in September, because it takes a little while for those payments to work through the municipalities to get into our pocket, but those are paid twice a year for the most part. If that happened, we would be hit to the extent of 4.1 million. So again, that's very severe, but we felt that in an act of prudence, that we would increase our provision for loan losses from 11 million by that 4.1 million amount to a total of 15.1 million, which is down there at the bottom of the page. And what is a little overstated, quite a bit overstated actually, and I'll have to review this again with Jane, but it's actually about 8.4% of overall invested assets, because that 15.8% just relates to the Green Bank alone and not all of our subsidiaries where we have solar funds and such. So in capturing all of that, it's really 8.4% of invested assets. So that's a good healthy amount of reserves to hold for these transactions. Now, next slide, I'll just show you what we're talking about in terms of residential loan and lease restructuring. If you look in the upper part where it says original schedule, that kind of shows you a simplified pattern of receiving $75 a month until the end of the contract in 2034. And what we're going with is a very simple, if we're asked, we would cancel out 3 payments in the current year and move those payments to the end of the contract, add 3 months of life to the contract and push it out into the future. This is what a number of financial institutions are doing with their consumer-based arrangements. It's very simple, it's very accommodating, and gives the consumer some breathing room. I do have the impacts down below. I'll just say that the sum and substance of it is our cash would be reduced by the payments not received, and on the P&L, we would not be earning that income currently. We would be pushing that interest income out into the future, because won't be any time value of money adjustment to that. Next slide. And here's a CPACE example where we have an original schedule going from, say, 2020 out to 2034. When these high value transactions are restructured, we do restructure them with time value. So it is not just moving one payment out into the future. We actually capture the time value of money by adding an extra payment or so, as is shown here. So it pushes out the maturity by maybe 6 months to a year. So it's just to give you an idea of how we're going to retain the value for the Green Bank, even though the cash is reduced, our income is not, because we would keep accruing the interest on the transaction. Next slide. And so as a result, with the staff expecting to be potentially inundated with a number of these requests, and with that requiring us to respond in a very simple, straightforward manner, as I've just explained to you, we're seeking the adjustment and approval, which would allow us to essentially take over the level of approval up to what was previously the deployment committee, meaning up to $1 million. But there would also be some adjustments to that that we would also be allowed to do adjustments, as I just explained, maintaining time value of money, etc., for all CPACE transactions of any amount, because those would be handled in a straightforward way, just moving one payment out, and it's ultra secure, secured by the lien on the property. Next slide, please. So these are the conditions, and the conditions are that it would be a maximum 6-month deferral, except in a rare case where you have a CPACE transaction that renews, that is paid annually. There are only like 3 or 4 transactions like that in our entire portfolio. The process would follow the documentation of doing a net present value calculation to see the impact to the green bank, and a typical ARS process where it's signed off by all the officers and the accounting department and legal. And then we would report quarterly to the board, making sure that you know exactly what's happening in the portfolio, and so that we can all keep tabs on the situation. Next slide, please. And that's the resolution. The resolution would allow for this modification in the loan loss decision framework, as well as approve of staff increasing the provision for loan losses by 4.1 million. Thanks very much. Madam Chair.
Are there any questions?
This is Matt. I guess my concern is if the deployment committee review was sort of sound policy earlier, and the only thing that is changing here is the volume of review, I just wonder if at the end this will get picked up by the auditors, or will look like it was really just based on volume, not based on what's sound fiscal oversight. Bert, can you just talk to that and see? I mean, do you agree? I mean, is the main motivator here is you guys have to move faster and have more volume?
Well, yes, and that for, say, we're containing what we're doing, so we're not getting involved. Like, for example, the Brookfield Y, for instance, Matt, that was a very complicated transaction. It had a number of twists and turns to it. This is a simple moving one payment out in the case of CPACE, right? Moving that out into the future, and keeping our time value of money benefit. So, we're keeping the value for the green bank. It's not an impairment of the asset. It's changing the structure by extending the term. So, and in the case of residential transactions, it's limiting it to this 3 months deferral. And if we need to come back, if we have to come back a second time, then we would come back to the deployment committee to, with those transactions, which we wouldn't expect there to be many, but we could circle back to deployment on those.
Yeah, this is Mackie. I'll just add, it's the standardization of this here, as opposed to Brookfield Wire and the other ones where there's problems we're solving for. This different problems. This one, it's the same across the board, and we've got we've built out documentation and process behind how we deal with them, in a standardized way for each one, which we're happy to share any of that, the process flow and documents we've created. That's helpful.
Okay, so the restructuring in the table, because the table seems so simplified on slide 26, that restructuring really is with sort of an asterisk, and the limitations on the restructuring are the ones you gave us on the next slide. Is that
right?
Essentially? Okay. All right.
This is Binu. I have
hi, this is John. Is there some point? I mean, I know that each of these transactions can be handled in this way. Is there some point where the cumulative effect is like there's a kind of a tipping point that maybe the board ought to know about, or is that not an issue?
Well, I would say that we could come up with some kind of a threshold of of reporting, but we would be reporting to the board quarterly. So we have very few transactions at the present time, but I would expect by the time we come around in July, the July timeframe, or even at the next board meeting, we'll be updating the board regularly on this, John. So we don't expect these requests to, we don't expect an avalanche of requests, but we just want to be prepared that we can be responsive to customers.
All right. It's just, it really is occurring to me, because I don't normally deal with finance, that that we're headed into like a kind of a deep recession here, and that it's going to have a big impact on us.
Well, what I can say is that we're not anticipating that. We think we're number one, we're well secured, and number two, we've currently got an $84 million net position and considerable cash and lines of credit resources to be able to. I mean, the $4 million that I pointed out is rather minor, and that would account for the next 3 months, and for every month that this goes on, we pick up another $600,000 of impact on a worst case basis. So, so that would put us in over 6 months, maybe closer to about $6 million of impact, which is still well within our the financial strength of the Green Bank. Given not only our net position of $84 million, but also our cash and credit lines.
All right. Well, that's better. I'm just feeling like, man, we just got through the sweeps and then the world falls apart.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think the takeaway, John, is like we're trying to develop a framework that's standardized to help our customers weather the storm while still maintaining our foundation of sustainability by deferring that interest income to the future.
Right. Yeah, I don't want to take any more time. I know Mike is waiting for the vote, but thank you.
Banu, you had a question?
Yeah. Banu?
It was John's questions that's answered. Thank you.
Great minds think alike.
So any more questions, or are we prepared to ask for a motion to approve Resolution 4?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution 4 is approved.
Excellent. We're now going to switch gears and move to the incentive programs agenda item. Celia, are you there? So.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, I had to unmute.
There you go. No problem at all. So we're going to turn this to Celia Price. And, if Carrie's still there and we need assistance, Carrie, we'll have you weigh in as well. Okay, Celia.
I'm here. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So the RSIP program is the main program under the incentive programs, as you all know. That's the residential solar. Our current status is we've reached 320 megawatts of approvals. Our statutory target is 350 megawatts. So we are getting pretty close to that target. We have seen significant impacts due to COVID-19 in the residential solar sector. And in particular, the last few weeks, we've had very significant drop off in new applications for incentives, which reflects the difficulty that contractors are having signing up new customers as Mackie alluded to earlier in the commercial sector. So you can see in the chart here that the most recent week in April, we had a drop from 114 incentive applications down to 71. And I would expect that would likely continue. I don't know if it'll get worse. It could. We are already close to our fiscal year target of 60 megawatts just by virtue of the fact that we had a very high volume year up to now. So we could still reach that target despite these slowdowns. I did want to mention that one of our biggest contractors, Trinity Solar, we heard their sales are down 40%. They're about 40% of our market. And also, they've already laid off about 25% of their staff. So that's one data point for you. Next slide, please. Under the incentive programs, we also have a couple residential financing programs. I'm going to turn that over to Carrie for an update.
Thank you, Celia. So Smarty, like our other programs, have seen a decrease over the prior month as well as the prior year. And March wasn't, a full month of impact, so it has continued to slow down. I don't know if we've mentioned during this meeting, but the residential energy efficiency programs that the utilities run are on hold, paused entirely. So that part of the market is completely seized up, and significant layoffs being incurred. And HVAC and solar, as Celia mentioned on solar, but we're seeing on an HVAC as well, are significantly slowed down. We already, I guess we didn't discuss in this product, but like our other programs, we have said to our lenders in the Smarty program, 90-day payment deferrals upon request are fine with us, and you'll still be covered by the loan loss reserve, as Bert had mentioned previously on the loss reserve framework. We have only gotten a few projects in from Eastern Savings Bank, 3 to 4 projects under Smarty that we know are going into 90-day payment deferrals, but we do expect more. And then because the energy efficiency part of the market is seized up, and we require HES for the 2.99% special offer that we are going to be launching. We did delay that, but we also are watching closely for when we can launch it, because we believe it's going to really be a boon to our contractors and homeowners, of course, when we are able to offer that to spur volume and help with the recovery. And then on the Solar for All campaign, this is our partnership with Posigen, targeted at low to moderate income communities, the solar lease plus energy efficiency. We've seen a slowdown in sales, in line with everything else we're seeing. And we had 5 different municipal campaigns that we're going to launch this spring and summer. Those are all on hold. There are some creative things that some of the towns are doing in terms of holding virtual webinars to educate folks about solar, so that when the market opens back up again, the campaigns can open up. There's a heavy outreach component to these, solar block parties, meetings, in libraries, in houses of worship and what have you. So social distancing needs to be somewhat of a thing of the past before these sorts of tactics and campaigns can launch again. That's it for these 2 programs.
Thank you, Carrie. As Mackie presented earlier, we have preliminary survey findings for various sectors, including the residential sector, which I'll speak to here. And I'll hit some of the high points given our time constraints. So the contractors have moved to 100% virtual sales. They're not going into homes. And again, significant reductions in demand have occurred. Customers are hesitant to make financial commitments during this time. On average, contractors have seen a 63% reduction in new business. It's actually closer to 70% if you look at the median. So really, really significant reductions there. in addition, over 50% reduction in existing business, meaning delays and cancellations. And even though the majority of the solar installation work can be done outside, even that work in terms of completing the solar installations is being delayed because of slowdowns in planning and safety. Trying to get inside to do electrical work is not really possible in most cases. And also there are significant delays at the municipalities in terms of permitting and inspections. There are some utility interconnection slowdowns as well. As Mackie alluded to, we've seen significant impacts in terms of layoffs, furloughs, reduced schedules, work stoppages, and then companies temporarily closing completely. Most companies have said they need 6 months to recover after business resumes, and another 4 of them said they'll need a year. More interesting is that many of them, almost all of them, have applied to the federal Paycheck Protection Program for funds, and only 1 of them has received funding so far. So they really are needing help right now. Hopefully, these companies will get the help when the next tranche of federal funding comes through. So the contractors have a lot of needs right now: cash, debt relief, state support, and they're asking for extensions to the program and additional incentives. So let me stop there, unless there are questions.
Any questions, comments from the board?
So yeah, this is Matt. Just one quick question. Do we know, I heard from one vendor, whether taking that PPP money puts them in a position that they have to pay prevailing wage? Is that a landmine?
No,
or iceberg?
that is not a requirement.
Okay, good. Thanks, Brian.
Any other questions, comments before we transition here? Great, and we're just today is the final week on the responses to the survey. We've got a really good response rate, so the team's going to try to crunch all of that data next week, and then the following week, I think what we're going to do is a webinar to all of our stakeholders to share the data, and then we're going to consider whether or not we can shorten the survey and do it once a month so that we can track sentiment over time. Our goal is to really figure out what things we can do to help speed up the recovery once we're able to. Any final questions, comments? All right. Okay, so why don't we move to then agenda item 5B. So this is the residential solar investment program. So what we're asking for here is the board's guidance to support, provide us guidance and support us in helping to make some recommendations on possible RCIP changes. But let me just go through these. So you all might recall that the program we've been implementing since the passage of the statute back in July of 2011 really has 3 objectives to it. The first one is that we administer a declining incentive block structure. They wanted to see a reduced market reliance on incentives over time. And when we rolled this program out in February of 2012, the equivalent incentive price was about $136 per ZREC equivalent. So we use the ZREC as a barometer. And then in step 14, we're currently in step 15, but in step 14 through last fiscal year through June 30th of 2019, the incentive was an equivalent ZREC price of $21. So you can see right there how far we've come down. A significant reduction, I think, of about 85%. And compared to the ZREC, the RCIP program is delivering more megawatts of clean energy per dollar of renewable energy credit incentive. And overall, it represents about, our incentive is about 10% of the installed cost of a solar PV system. So that was our first policy objective. And DEEP, by statute, is required to approve of that declining incentive block structure. So they play a role in helping us administer the program. The second thing is that we've all been focused on is the capacity target. So when this policy began, it started at 30 megawatts, then got increased in July of 2015 to 300 megawatts. And then last year it was increased by another 50 megawatts. So it's trying to achieve this capacity target, or there's a date, a timeline on it, December 31st of 2022, whichever occurs sooner. But we all know that January 1st of 2022 is when the tariff begins. So I'm happy to go into some of that detail in a second. But the third one is where we've really been focused the last year is there's an economic development piece of this goal. It's stated in the name of the statute. It's also built into the statute, which is fostering the sustained orderly development of a local solar industry. So we view that as, once we achieve our policy target, that we've helped build a marketplace for local installers that will deliver a long-term solution to those customers, installing solar, doing the operations and maintenance, continuing to support the overall market. So those are the three objectives of the RSIP policy. This legislative session in February and March, there was an effort by the solar industry to increase the RSIP by another 50 megawatts to 400 megawatts. We had actually argued in the legislative session that we didn't feel that was necessary. We felt that to support the economic development of the industry, what was going to be important was the need for a battery storage incentive. So House Bill 5351 proposed a 1,000 megawatt battery storage target in the requirement for a residential battery storage program to be developed and rolled out. So we had taken that position in public testimony before COVID-19. So then COVID-19 hit, and it's just fundamentally changed, our position, right? The stability of the local solar industry, as Celia has laid out, is really up in the air right now. So what we are looking at doing is proposing a policy with the following objectives. One, we're very focused on ensuring that that economic development objective is maintained. We don't want to, for example, limp into that 350 megawatt target, having delivered 50 to 60 to 70 megawatts a year in the last couple of years, and now going forward, having seen that drop to 20 megawatts. That's just we don't want to limp in and say we've achieved the goal without ensuring the viability of the industry. And secondly, we want to make sure that as we support the economic development of the industry, that we're also helping transition the market from net metering to a tariff. So the tariff is supposed to begin January 1st of 2022. There's a lot of things that need to get done before that period of time. Eversource, for example, needs to be on smart meters by that time. So that's going to be a very heavy lift for them to achieve. But we fully believe that we can get from today's net metering to a tariff. So what we're working on, proposing some modifications to the statute with PURA and DEEP are a couple of things. One is aligning the net metering transition to actually the time frame on when the tariff is ready. So PURA took a look at some suggested modifications we had to the RSIP and said, you know what, the January 1st of 2022 date may be an arbitrary date, may not be achievable. Why don't we just make sure that net metering exists until such time as a utility program tariff is in place? So you'll see that in the appendix. The capacity target, we're proposing increasing it by an additional 100 megawatts to 450 megawatts. This will give us more time to work with the industry to get them stabilized, to do what we need to do to support demand creation and to kind of get them back up and on their feet. And just coming out this way, I think will help them see that the state is behind them in supporting their businesses. The cost recovery elements will still be in there. We've got some language in there on approved projects so that the utilities are able to engage in purchasing the SRECs from us through the master purchase agreements based on approved projects. And then there was one suggestion of a cleanup from Pura that you see on page 5 of 6 in that draft policy position there. So what we wanted to do was to have the board kind of weigh in and give us some guidance. Our thought is, we don't know if there's going to be another legislative session, if there's going to be a summer session. There have been, we've seen in some of the recent press that if there is a session that the Energy and Technology Committee leaders are looking at 2 programs specifically, extending them. One is the virtual net metering program, which communities have been taking advantage of. And the second is the increase of the residential solar investment program. Those are all things we're hearing through the grapevine. But we just want to make sure that we propose something that continues to maintain the overall objectives of the policy while ensuring the economic development of the industry. So why don't I stop there and see if there are questions, comments.
This
Brian,
is Lonnie.
this is,
Oh, go. Who was that?
this is Eric. Yeah.
Oh, go, Eric.
Yeah, just wondering, could you explain a little better or more clearly for me, the nexus between the delay in the instituting the tariff and I guess the COVID impacts? I think it is, I'm assuming, I think the COVID impacts are the primary driver of that, or yeah, help me understand the drive for that.
Yeah, so what we're seeing based on Celia's feedback in the survey is a slowing down of the market, right? You've got the contractors, the companies themselves who are experiencing, their own concerns from their staff about going out in the field and contracting it, to the customer side not wanting anybody in the home. So it's just an overall pullback of demand in the marketplace. So that's a concern. And as we've really, this market has really over time been pretty good, pretty stable at deploying 50 to 60 megawatts a year, whatever that is a month. They've done a really good job of building to that point. Now we expect to see a significant reduction in that. And as that reduces, we get closer to our target. So once we hit the target, the program stops. So if we've effectively limped kind of into the target, then there's no other mechanism to help the industry weather the long-term impact other than increasing the target and enabling us to help them get. Now, the transition from net metering to a tariff is really important. We've over time come to believe that that's an important part of the state's policy on compensating solar, is moving from net metering to a tariff. The tariff is a mechanism that's going to allow for a reasonable compensation to a homeowner. So in the event, for example, that the investment credit disappears, homeowners will be adequately compensated for a federal determination having a local state impact. So we believe the tariff is the right way to go. We just need to ensure the economic viability of the industry and get ourselves from here to there, from the net metering to the tariff, so that we maintain our economic development objectives. Hope that helps, Eric.
Hi, this is John. Just a comment that during this whole COVID time, I feel like we're really losing ground on the issue of climate change. And despite the fact that carbon is greatly reduced because of people not traveling and lack of manufacturing and stuff like that, that we're going to come out of this and we were already behind the curve, and we're going to be even more so. And so I really support this. I think it's important that we do what we can in order to get the momentum back when we're at a point where we're through all this social isolation and this just this incredible thing with the virus. So I think that we need to come out of this in a very aggressive way and very supportive of climate change initiatives, and this is one of those steps.
Exactly, John. As the shelter-in-place policies, social distancing policies kind of come back in check, it's all about what's called the V-shaped recovery. How quickly can we bounce back? And what we're focused on is ensuring that the clean energy industry bounces back quicker than everything else, because we want to see a clean energy future that confront climate change, creating jobs and delivering energy savings to customers. So agree with that totally.
This is Lonnie. I agree that this is a good place to be as well. And as we all know, the tariff versus net metering controversy is still not gone away. And is it going to be a done deal, or was it going to be a done deal January 1st, 2022 to go to the tariff? I thought we were going to have a PURA docket to let everybody argue it out again, or had that been resolved?
No, that's right. There was going to be a PURA docket to set the tariff, right? So January 1st of 2022, if there's not a tariff rate set, then the tariff can't be implemented. The challenge with setting the tariff rate, given all the different options available to customers, use, buy, sell, buy all, sell all, instantaneous netting, all the things that have to happen, is that Eversource doesn't have the infrastructure in place on a metering perspective to tell the customer what they're consuming immediately versus what they're producing on solar, and they don't have the billing infrastructure. So I suspect there's going to be, that's going to continue to be a part of the industry's argument at PURA, is that Eversource is not ready. UI is totally ready, but we'll see. And that's why PURA came back into our draft recommendation and specifically changed that language to be cognizant of delays.
Well, this is Eric. I'll just, I'm Lonnie's comment resonates with me about the controversy. There are PURA dockets ahead of us, so I think there's ways to address the changing COVID climate with this. So I'm uncomfortable sort of taking our foot off the pedal with respect to the tariff deadline at this point. So I'll be opposing.
This is this is Sally. I just want to clarify one thing. The tariff deadline is, I believe, currently set in statute to start by January or start in 2022. I think this extension to RCIP, in a sense, is unrelated because what we would propose is that the RCIP would be extended until PURA and the utilities are ready to implement the tariff. And the main delay in terms of having that tariff ready is actually all the metering infrastructure. So the extension of RCIP, would just help us bridge the time period up to when the tariff is ready. I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, Celia, this is Brian. I think Celia just hit the nail on the head right there.
And I would agree. I mean, I hearken back to when we really started the RCIP, and there was, a suspension of it, and there's so much dislocation when the industry doesn't know how long the runway is. So I think, again, it's not really that we're arguing to change the date of the tariff. We're just, I think, by providing some predictability to the industry so they see it in the statutes, that really helps private industry, our industry plan. So I think it's a common sense, good approach. And I think, excellent job looking ahead at all three of those bullets, Brian, or items on your bullet list there.
Any more questions or comments? Do I hear a motion to approve Resolution 3?
So moved, John.
Second, Matt.
Second, Benu.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Just a comment under discussion, which wasn't called for, but I'm going to defer to the expertise of my distinguished colleagues on this committee. I'll support it. Just noting for the record that I do think movement to the tariff system is really important, and that we should do everything that we can to make sure that's done as soon as we can, not with given, but recognizing the strain on the current circumstances. So I appreciate the information from colleagues on the board, and I'll support the resolution. Thank you.
The resolution passes.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. And still, again, a big road ahead. There's no telling what the legislature is going to do, but we wanted to be prepared and to make sure that we're in alignment with DEEP and PURA. Okay, so we thought we would quickly do an update on the grid modernization docket. So actually, Lonnie was the co-chair during this legislative session back in 2017 and was the leader of this grid modernization piece of legislation. I was going back and forth with Lonnie a little bit this week, and we had Richard Kaufman, the energy czar from New York, testifying in that whole hearing. But all of that has resulted in a docket over at PURA that Chair Gillette has been implementing and doing a great job of it. There's this docket 171203 that has 6 different reopeners. There are 5 coming, but are all specifically focused on that old grid modernization policy. These reopeners, we've spent a lot of time in New Britain over the last year and a half. So we've divided and conquered with our staff. So the first reopener is energy affordability, looking at both residential and commercial affordability. Isabel Hazelwood on our team has been the lead. On the residential side, she's been working really closely with Brenda Watson at Operation Fuel. On the advanced metering infrastructure, we're an observer here. This is Alex Kovtunenko, our counsel, who's watching over this docket. This is an important docket because this is where Eversource is actually seeking support to build out their metering infrastructure. And this ties specifically back to the tariff that we were just talking about. So this docket's an important one. The electric storage docket, I currently lead on. I've got a great team behind me, Celia, Isabel, Matt, a lot of us. And then we're supported by Navigant Consulting. I'll get to submitting an RFP in a second. The zero emission vehicles reopener, Matt Masunis, is the lead on our end here. He's our transportation lead. There's reopener number 5 on innovative technologies that's looking to create a regulatory sandbox to support new technologies. For the old Clean Energy Fund board members, this is kind of like the former Clean Energy Fund. I've connected Connecticut Innovations to PURA through this docket. This is kind of where new technologies get looked at. And then there's an interconnection docket that we're an observer on, a reopener number 6. Alex again is leading our efforts there to watch what's happening in the docket. And the solar industry obviously is very closely tied into that docket. So PURA issued, and we responded. We provided this material into the board on our comments into these various reopeners earlier this week. PURA is going to take all the comments that came in and redraft RFPs and go back out to the market. You all might recall back in our several comprehensive plans over the last couple of years, either we were going to have a battery storage program underneath the Electric Efficiency Partner Program or a side program through the RCIP. We fully expect to apply in this process to be an administrator of a battery storage program in combination with solar, as well as looking at the various zero emission vehicle programs that we might look to develop. So that's kind of an update on the grid mod docket. Maybe there are questions, comments. Big docket, important policies happening here. Okay. Why don't we move to our last item? Brian, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. And one thing I would point out, Brian, to amend the bylaws, we need 2/3 of all the board members. It's not of all the board members present. So we should skip 7A1 because I don't think we have 2/3 of the board members at this point. But we could do the revisions to the board ethics policy, which is really straightforward if you guys so choose. We can do that quickly.
Yeah, why don't we do that, Brian, and we can come back to the proposed revisions to the bylaws at the next one.
Exactly. So if we could just jump ahead a couple slides.
Good catch. Thank you.
So, and these are just, obviously, clauses were in the news when there was news that didn't involve just COVID-19. And one of the recommendations that came out of an auditor's report was certain revisions that should be made to all quasi-public conduct policies. And basically, they said, you have, they're looking at ethical policies of other quasi. You have an ethics policy, but there's no potential consequences. So we just added in a very broad manner into the ethics policy that there's potential consequences for violating of these. And then secondly, something that we've already been doing anyways through the oath, but we just did it in a more we just added in the process right into the policy was an acknowledgement section for all the directors to sign. So basically confirming that they did sign up for that ethics policy. So at some later date, we will get that to you, but hoping we could get this, at least this passed today.
Questions or comments? An example of the punitives? Okay, do I hear a motion to approve Resolution 7?
So moved, Matt.
Bettina, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, Resolution 7 is approved.
Thank you, Lonnie.
Thank you. So that concludes. So we're going to postpone the last item because it's 2/3.
Correct.
Yeah, we will come back to the bylaw amendment. Great catch, Frank.
And we'll come back to that in a future meeting.
That's right.
Okay, good. All right. So it feels as if we've hit our adjournment moment.
Well, we wanted to do maybe some quick updates if we could. We have a few minutes. Actually, we wanted to do the Shrek update.
Oh, okay.
The board would. So rather than do these updates, you all can take a look at these materials in your file. Why don't we shift to Mike, where Mike will provide an update on where we are with the Green Liberty Bonds.
Thanks, Brian. So we continue to make good progress on the Green Liberty Bonds despite market interruption from COVID. On the legal document side, we've completed the Master Trust and Shrek indentures, which the board reviewed and approved last month. We've also got a meeting set with OPM and OTT next week to go over self-sufficiency findings, which the board also took a look at that memo as well. I think that there's two real paths here. There's working with OPM OTT and getting SCARF approval as a credit enhancement. And so on that process, we've got the meeting next week, and then we've also got to await updates to the state's continued disclosure requirements, which is necessary for the type of bond we want. And so on that disclosure update, there's also next week, there's some important milestones coming out for it. There's going to be a consensus revenue forecast that takes a look at the analysis on the economy and what impact COVID will have on that. And then after that, the week of May 4th, that's when the disclosure on the general obligation offering statements comes out. And then mid-May, there's going to be rating agency calls to go over the state's credit, as well as due diligence calls with underwriters. And so it's these important steps to the states on the state side that we're going to try to keep close tabs on and piggyback on with our own transaction disclosure requirements. And so once the state's disclosure is updated, and presuming we can get approval for SCARF use, that's those two that can come together to allow us to go to market. The other sort of parallel path we're pursuing is continuing talks with S&P to get our rating. And on that front, we've sent them a lot of diligence documentation, both on Shrek itself and on the projects that go into the master trust indenture. And they're currently reviewing it, and we will, I think we're looking to have a meeting with them in sort of mid to late May. The timing here being that we want to get the rating, but we want to make sure that our rating doesn't get stale before we're able to access the market. And so typically you want to be able to go to market within 30 days of obtaining your rating. And so we need to have good clarity on actually being able to execute and having enough liquidity as a new issuer for a taxable immunity bond before we go and get that rating. And so, both the S&P process and the market having seized up, as well as the state SCARF and disclosure process, is pushing us toward what seemingly looks like a late June or possibly early July execution. And I'll pause there for any questions or comments.
It's Lonnie. I'm just really. You think we'll be ready to go by late June or early July?
I'm a glass half full kind of guy, but understanding that it's that could very well be the case. In another month or two, I can come back with an update saying maybe August or September.
Okay.
This is Bettina. I'm hopeful that they can get it done, and I'm kind of even more optimistic that maybe you could get it done before the July 4th holiday. Hopefully you will have the SCARF, and so the state's disclosure documents and the state's rating, of course, are key to that because you will be wrapping it with the state's disclosure and information. Just your financial advisors and your underwriters will tell you this. The muni market pretty much takes a siesta, definitely the last 2 weeks of August, but pretty much the whole month of August. So it would be probably good to get it done in June or July. And we are also, can't wait to have you guys make your presentation. We're really looking forward to it.
Okay, was there something else, Brian, that you wanted to run by us?
No, that's it. We'll send out. We were just in a bond buyer podcast earlier this week, Eric and I, on the Green Liberty Bond. So we'll share that with you all. But no, other than that, thank you all. Everyone be safe, be well, and I think that's it, Lonnie.
Okay, so a move to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay.
Tina, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the meeting's adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
care,
Joe.
folks.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Be well.